Hello and welcome to Daybreak. You're watching it live on A News and I'm here to take you through the day's top stories. So here are the key headlines. Iranian forces seized 2 ships on the Strait of Hormuz as Washington and Tehran maintain separate blockades. The EU agrees to unblock €90 billion loan for Ukraine after the newly elected Hungarian president lifts veto. And Lebanese Prime Minister accuses Israel of war crimes after a strike kills a journalist. Tensions are escalating in the Gulf as Iran hardens its stance on the Strait of Hormuz. It's our leading story this morning. Now, Tehran has accused the US of maintaining a naval blockade on its ports and confirmed the seizure of 2 vessels in the key shipping route over alleged violations. Washington says its pressure measures and maritime restrictions remain in place despite Iran's claims.
Iran says it is impossible to reopen the Strait of Hormuz while alleged ceasefire violations by the United States and Israel continue, escalating tensions and disrupting global shipping. In a post on X, Iran's parliament speaker and chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf accused Washington of maintaining a naval blockade on Iranian ports, describing it as hostage-taking of the global economy. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Tehran remains open to negotiations but warned that breach of commitments, blockade and threats are blocking meaningful progress with the US. The comments come as clashes intensify in and around the Strait of Hormuz, a strategic waterway and key artery for global oil and gas supplies. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said it had seized 2 vessels, accusing them of operating without authorization and attempting to leave the strait covertly, while allegedly tampering with navigation systems. Maritime security monitors also reported multiple incidents in the area. One vessel was fired upon by an Iranian-linked gunboat, sustaining heavy damage to its bridge. The escalation continues amid stalled diplomatic efforts, with planned talks in Pakistan between US and Iranian officials yet to begin. US President Donald Trump has indicated a second round of negotiations could take place within the next 36 to 72 hours as Pakistan continues mediation efforts. Trump extended the ceasefire on Tuesday and said the naval blockade would remain in place. The White House added there is no fixed deadline, with the timeline tied to Iran submitting a unified proposal. With both sides maintaining opposing blockades and negotiations uncertain, the future of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remains in doubt.
Now let's take a look at the stories shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to The Guardian. And leading with our top story, we stay with Iran, which has said it's impossible to reopen Strait of Hormuz amid flagrant ceasefire breaches, is what Iran is saying. As you just heard there, that this is where things are currently at a standstill, only because Iran's chief negotiator said it will be impossible to reopen the important waterway that holds 20% of the global oil that goes throughout it, and that's because of what the US has been doing in regards to blocking its Iran ports. Now, the US has said that it's not going to lift it and it's going to continue as much as it needs to in order to put pressure on Iran in order to come to the table. Now, on Wednesday, Iranian forces seized 2 ships in this critical waterway on the Strait of Hormuz, which is what you're seeing a picture of that here now. Now, in regards to negotiations, Iran says it's open to having talks with the US, and according to Iran President Masoud Pezeshkian, said a breach of commitments, blockade and threats are the main obstacles to genuine negotiations. So this is what's causing a bit of a rift between the US and Iran in order for them to come to the table. Now, on Tuesday night, the US president did announce an extension to the US-Iran ceasefire, which was due to end on Wednesday, but has been extended until both parties can come and progress on a mutual deal. Now, if we just quickly turn over to what's going on in Lebanon, because everything is quite connected. So in relation to what's happening in Lebanon, CNN is actually leading with Lebanese Prime Minister has accused Israel of war crimes after a strike kills a journalist. Now, this is recent. This comes after there was Israel struck in southern Lebanon on Wednesday and seriously injured a number of others and killed a journalist. Now, the journalist in question, which is this woman here, is Amal Khalil, worked for Lebanon's local newspaper and was killed while she was carrying out her journalistic duties, and that's according to Lebanon's national news agency, NNA. She is now the fourth media worker killed by Israel in Lebanon since March and since the war there began. So there's a number of conflict, but I need to remind you that today they're actually holding talks. Israel and Lebanon will be holding talks in the US today to discuss where they go from here. There is a 10-day ceasefire currently in place, which took effect last week, Friday. So we're coming up to a week. So talks now are quite critical in relation to this. But as you can see, the ceasefire is quite fragile as Lebanon has accused Israel of strikes, regardless of what they agreed to last week. But we will keep you updated in relation to that. Now let's head over to our next story, and that's on the Times in regards to what's going on in the UK. And riot police sent to French beaches in new Channel migrant deal. So this is riot-trained police will be sent to the beaches in France as part of a new almost $900 million deal with the UK to stop illegal migrants from crossing the English Channel. It's something that the UK has been trying to grasp hold of, and they're working closely with France because a lot of migrants go through the English Channel in order to pass through by France to get to the UK. Now, the UK Home Secretary is expected to sign the 3-year agreement with France today, which will see at least 50 police officers to tackle violence and hostile crowds. Now, the deal will also involve France deploying millions of pounds worth of drones, two new helicopters and a new camera system to track down and intercept people smugglers and illegal migrants, which is what is taking place. Now, the UK Home Secretary has said that her work with the French has stopped tens of thousands of illegal migrants boarding boats headed to the UK. But this is not everybody is happy with this, only because the UK's government's opposition party has accused it of handing over £500 million of its money with no conditions at all. But we'll keep you updated and to find out exactly how effective this 3-year deal with France is likely to be in order to deter illegal migrants coming over to the UK via these small boats. Now let's turn to our next story, and that's on NBC, and that's in regards to a chemical leak that took place on Wednesday morning, local time. 2 dead in chemical release at West Virginia manufacturing facility. Now, a chemical leak at West Virginia's silver recovery business killed 2 people and sent roughly around 30 others to hospital, and 1 is in serious condition, and that's according to authorities. Now, the leak occurred when workers were preparing to actually shut down part of this facility on Wednesday morning. A chemical gas reaction occurred at the plant involving 2 volatile substances, nitric acid and another substance, which resulted in a violent reaction that overcame the workers' emergency director told reporters on Wednesday. Now, among those injured were also 7 ambulance workers responding to the leak. Now, we have more on this story later on in the program where we can give you some more information in regards to the detail of this leak. But right now, we know that there are 2 people that have died due to this devastating chemical leak. Okay, now we go to our next story. The full story of the morning on the headlines is on Deutsche Welles, and that's in relation to Pope Leo, who has Pope Leo decries inequality in corrupt Equatorial Guinea. Now, the Pope has criticised the treatment of prisoners in Equatorial Guinea ahead of his visit to a jail known for its dire conditions. Now, we have been following the Pope since he arrived in the continent of Africa, travelling first to Angola, then he went to Cameroon, and now he's in Equatorial Guinea at this moment in time, and he's now addressing a number of issues. And he addressed the Central African nation on Wednesday at a mass that drew around 100,000 people. The Pope actually said, "My thoughts go to the poorest, to families experiencing difficulty, and to prisoners who are often forced to live in troubling hygienic and sanitary conditions." Now, this oil-rich country has a poor reputation for its human rights record, and a vast income inequalities is what reports have shown, and it's the final stop on the Pope's four-nation African tour. Now, Amnesty International said inmates in the Beta prison are reportedly routinely beaten as punishment, adding that numerous prisoners have neither been seen nor heard from their relatives, so they don't know whether or not they are alive or dead. But adding to that, the Pope also called for the country's resources to be used to improve the lives of the wider population and not just the privileged few. So this is the Pope's last visit, as I mentioned, of his tour to four separate nations throughout the continent of Africa, focusing on Angola and then travelling through to Cameroon, Angola, and the last stop was Equatorial Guinea. Well, that's the press roundup for now. Now we're going to take a short break, and when I return, I'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the top global stories. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told Germany's President Frank-Walter Steinmeier that the war between the US and Iran is starting to weaken Europe. In a phone call on Wednesday, Turkish President warned that the impact of the conflict would grow if global powers fail to act with what he called peace-orientated approaches. Erdogan said Turkey is working to end the Russia-Ukraine war through negotiations and is also seeking a diplomatic solution in relation to Iran. He added that unless the situation is addressed through diplomacy, the damage caused by the conflict would be far greater. Lebanon's Prime Minister has accused Israel of war crimes after an airstrike in the south of the country on Wednesday killed 5 people, including a journalist, and seriously wounded another. Israel's military said it struck 2 vehicles in southern Lebanon that departed from a military structure used by the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah, and added it does not target journalists. The strikes follow on from a US-mediated 10-day ceasefire which began almost a week ago. Separately, French President Emmanuel Macron said a second French soldier had died after an attack on United Nations peacekeepers in Lebanon last week, which he blamed on Hezbollah. Later today, representatives from Israel and Lebanon are set to hold a second round of talks. The United Nations has expressed concern over images showing the destruction or the desecration of a crucifix statue by an Israeli soldier in a Christian village in southern Lebanon. The footage has drawn widespread condemnation from Israeli leaders, the US and church officials. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said the UN welcomed reports of disciplinary action.
The picture that we saw was of the desecration of a crucifix was shocking. We were heartened to see that, at least from the reports, that disciplinary measures was taken very quickly against the soldiers.
Staying on Israel, and an Israeli airstrike killed 5 Palestinians, including 3 children, in the northern Gaza Strip on Wednesday. Health officials said there was no immediate comment from the Israeli military. 5 deaths are the latest violence to undermine the US-brokered ceasefire agreed in October after 2 years of full-scale war between Israel and Hamas. Key parts of the deal, including Hamas disarmament and Israeli troop withdrawals, have stalled. Since the ceasefire took effect, more than 780 Palestinians have been killed, according to local medics, while Israel says militants have killed 4 of its soldiers. To Europe, and EU leaders are moving to unlock a €90 billion financial lifeline for Ukraine after months of deadlock after Hungary lifted its veto. Here's our Europe correspondent with more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the EU is set to unlock a major financial lifeline for Ukraine, along with a fresh wave of sanctions against Russia. EU member states are expected to formally approve a 90 billion euro loan package for Kyiv today after months of political deadlock inside the bloc. The delay centered on Hungary, which blocked the deal in February amid a dispute over Russian oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline. However, after EU ambassadors started discussions on the loan Wednesday, Ukrainian officials informed their Hungarian counterparts that oil pumping resumed through that pipeline to Central Europe, prompting Budapest to lift the veto imposed by the Orbán government and clearing the way for agreement among all 27 member states. Now, the funding is critical. Ukraine is facing a growing wartime budget gap, with officials warning that without sustained external support, the government could struggle to maintain essential services and economic stability in the months ahead. If approved in the coming days, the package would mark one of the EU's most significant coordinated moves this year and a renewed show of unity after months of internal divisions, this all following the electoral defeat of Viktor Orbán and a shift in tone from the future Prime Minister Peter Magyar, who has signaled a push to rebuild Hungary's relationship with the bloc at a critical moment in the war. At the same time, Brussels is preparing what would be its 20th sanctions package against Russia, targeting energy revenues, financial networks, and the so-called shadow fleet used to bypass existing restrictions. Together, the measures point to a clear European strategy: keep Ukraine financially supported while maintaining pressure on Moscow. For EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, the loan sends a message that Russia cannot simply wait Ukraine out. More broadly, the twin moves reflect a more coordinated response at a critical point in the war, combining financial backing for Kyiv with sustained economic strain on Russia. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
A Russian airstrike has hit the southern-eastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro, injuring 7 people, including 2 children. Officials say 5 of the injured remain in hospital as emergency crews continue rescue efforts. In Russia's Tuapse, firefighters are still battling a refinery fire on its 3rd day after a reported Ukrainian drone strike with air quality worsening. Meanwhile, Russia says talks with the United States and Ukraine remain at a standstill, while President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is open to a ceasefire but sees little progress for now. Now to the US, and a chemical leak at a plant in West Virginia has killed at least 2 people and many others injured. Officials say the situation is being addressed and have assured the public that there has been no further contamination of water supplies.
At least 2 people have died and several others required medical attention following a chemical leak at a silver catalyst plant in West Virginia on Wednesday. The incident occurred at Catalyst Refiners in the unincorporated community of Institute. Authorities have since lifted an earlier shelter-in-place order and say they are working to manage the situation.
And once again, that's why the shelter-in-place was lifted and the roads were open. So I want to assure people that people have been on top of this. They're trying to address this situation. To the families we lost today, the families of those we lost today, our hearts are with you, and our state grieves for you. We stand ready to support you in every way possible.
Officials believe a chemical reaction occurred during a cleaning and decontamination process ahead of the plant's closure, releasing deadly hydrogen sulfide gas. The state's Department of Environmental Protection has been called in to assist with the safe disposal of waste materials generated during the process. Authorities say at least 1 person remains in critical condition, while more than 30 people, including 7 emergency responders, have been checked into medical facilities. Concerns about possible contamination of water supplies have been dismissed, with officials assuring the public that drinking water has not been affected.
No, the water plants that we get water around here and in the St. Albans will not be affected. This stuff is a gas. It did not get into the water. There's no water, even if it did get into water, there's no water treatment plants till you get to Huntington. from that location. So it will not affect drinking water or anything like that.
Federal agencies, including the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, are expected to investigate the incident.
A senior envoy to US President Donald Trump has suggested that Italy replace Iran at the upcoming FIFA World Cup. According to the Financial Times, the proposal is part of efforts to repair ties between Trump and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. US envoy Paolo Zampoli said Italy's strong football record could justify inclusion. Italy failed to qualify after losing a playoff to Bosnia and Herzegovina in a penalty shootout, marking their third straight absence from the tournament. There has been no official response from FIFA. Iran says it is ready to compete despite earlier concerns about match locations and security issues. Mexico has reopened one of its most iconic heritage sites at the Teotihuacan after a rare act of violence shocked visitors earlier this week. Authorities moved quickly to strengthen security and restore confidence so that tourists can continue their visits safely.
Security has been tightened at Teotihuacan as the famous archaeological complex reopened to visitors on Wednesday. The site had closed temporarily after a gunman shot and killed a Canadian woman on Monday. 13 others were injured before the attacker took his own life. Officials described the incident as rare for a major tourist destination. On reopening day, members of Mexico's National Guard joined state and local police across the area. According to Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, around 40 National Guard troops have been added to patrols.
As instructed by the President, we will also have security arches, which will of course give us an additional layer of security. For now, today, police presence has been increased at each of the 5 entrances to the archaeological site.
For now, visitors face basic bag checks while authorities work to install metal detectors. Hundreds of tourists returned on Wednesday, many receiving free entry after the closure. Some said the stronger security presence made them feel safer, though concerns remain.
The incident has already happened, and we feel there will be enough security here. I do feel that in Mexico, they should have done bag checks.
I didn't know if the site would be open due to what happened, but I was pretty sure it would be. I'm not feeling insecure because I was pretty sure there would be a lot of policemen and police around. But I think it's really terrible what happened because it's such a popular site in Mexico. And
Local vendors are urging tourists to keep visiting. They say the community depends heavily on tourism and hope confidence will return quickly.
Peru's defense minister and foreign minister have resigned over a dispute over a major deal to purchase US-made F-16 fighter jets. The resignations followed interim President Jose Maria Balcazar's decision to defer the $3.5 billion deal to the next government after the June runoff. Balcazar said his administration would not commit such a large package during a transition and that the incoming leadership should decide. However, the defense and foreign ministers opposed the move, warning it could damage Peru's credibility and disrupt negotiations. The dispute comes amid political uncertainty after an inconclusive election with a runoff set for the June 7th. Now to East Asia, and South Korea and Vietnam have agreed to deepen cooperation in nuclear energy and high-tech industries as both countries look to strengthen supply chains amid ongoing global trade uncertainty. The deal was signed in Hanoi, where Vietnam's leader To Lam and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung oversaw 12 cooperation agreements spanning energy, technology and security at the center. Plans to explore joint development and financing of a nuclear power plant as Vietnam races to meet soaring energy demand. The partnership also comes under growing pressure from Washington, with the US urging Vietnam to cut reliance on Chinese components and tighten supply chains. Wednesday marked the most demanding leg of Pope Leo's visit on his tour of the continent of Africa. The pontiff took 3 separate flights across Equatorial Guinea in a single day and met worshippers in multiple cities, placing Africa at the centre of his global mission.
Pope Leo is in Equatorial Guinea on the final full day of his Africa tour, drawing large crowds as he continues a message focused on inequality, justice and human dignity. The 70-year-old pontiff began Wednesday in the eastern city of Mongomo, near the border with Gabon, after travelling roughly 700 kilometres across the country as part of a tightly scheduled visit to 3 cities in a single day. Crowds gathered in their tens of thousands, dancing and cheering as his white Pope mobile arrived at the Basilica of the Immaculate Conception. Organisers released clouds of coloured smoke, reflecting both Vatican and national flags, as around 100,000 people filled the area inside and outside the church, according to the Vatican. During Mass at the largest church in Central Africa, Pope Leo delivered a pointed message, urging the country to confront its deep economic divides despite its oil wealth.
May
the Lord help us to become more and more a society in which each person, according to their respective responsibilities, works for the common good and not for private interests, overcoming inequalities between the privileged and the disadvantaged, expanding spaces of freedom, and always safeguarding the dignity of the human person. I think of the poorest, of families in difficulty, and of prisoners, who are often forced to live in troubling hygienic and sanitary conditions.
Equatorial Guinea remains one of Africa's richest countries in terms of natural resources, yet continues to face stark disparities between elites and the wider population, a contrast the pontiff addressed directly. The remarks were met with sustained applause from the crowd, reflecting both the scale of the gathering and the resonance of his message. Later in the day, Pope Leo is expected to travel to Bata, where he will visit a high-security detention centre, a site that has drawn criticism from human rights groups, and meet detainees. He will also pray at the site of the 2021 military barracks explosions that killed more than 100 people. The visit marks the final stage of a 4-nation African tour that has taken the pontiff across Algeria, Cameroon, Angola and Equatorial Guinea, consistently placing inequality, governance and human dignity at the centre of his message.
Turning to space now, and a new discovery could reshape what scientists know about the moon and even influence technology on Earth. Chinese researchers say a newly identified mineral from a lunar meteorite may hold clues to conditions never seen on our planet. Let's take a closer look.
Chinese scientists have identified a new mineral from a lunar meteorite, marking a significant step in the study of materials formed beyond Earth. The mineral, named cerium magnesium changesite, is the 11th lunar mineral ever discovered, according to the China Geological Survey. It was found in a 44-gram meteorite, the first lunar meteorite known to have fallen in China, with a dark, molten outer shell. Scientists say the discovery offers rare insight into conditions that may not exist on Earth.
When it was formed, it experienced 2 different conditions. The physical condition was temperature and pressure, while the chemical condition was its element content. The discovery of a new mineral in extraterrestrial space would indicate that conditions once existed beyond Earth that have never occurred on our planet.
The mineral itself is colorless, transparent and brittle, with a glassy texture. Its grains are extremely small, typically less than 10 micrometers, about 1/25 the width of a human hair, and it exhibits a distinct fluorescent effect. Beyond its scientific significance, researchers say the material could have practical applications.
Cerium magnesium changesite is found to have a fluorescent effect, which has promising potential applications in producing LEDs. Its rare earth element ratio, its magnesium and iron content, as well as the characteristic changes in its crystal structure,
Experts say discoveries like this influence the development of new materials here on Earth.
Very interesting. Well, I'm going to take a quick break, but when I return, I'll be taking a closer look at some of the regional stories and we'll be joined by a guest. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now let's go to the stories in the region. And first we head to Iran, and a fragile pause in the war between the US and Iran is doing little to ease doubts in Tehran. Many now question whether diplomacy can deliver a peaceful outcome or if the standoff is far from over. Let's take a look at this.
Tensions remain high in Iran, where voices on the streets of Tehran reflect deep skepticism about the chances of any breakthrough with the United States. The reaction comes after a temporary halt to US attacks and Iran's seizure of vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global energy route now at the center of escalating confrontation. Many Iranians say Washington has yet to achieve any meaningful gains. For some, the idea of negotiations offers little hope.
Although the United States has never backed down, negotiations in this form are in practice fruitless unless US policy changes, which is almost unlikely to happen. It then moves into a phase of endurance, where whichever country shows greater resilience will be more successful.
Others see the current pause not as de-escalation, but as preparation.
It appears there is preparatory positioning for a renewed start from the US side. At least in my view, there is a renewed beginning in the making. And it wants to attack again, and in any case, gain a number of advantages.
Anti-US sentiment is visible across parts of the capital, with murals and slogans reinforcing a narrative of resistance, while some graffiti dismisses both ceasefire and negotiation as futile. The public reaction follows Iran's seizure of 2 vessels in the Strait of Hormuz on Wednesday, tightening its grip on a strategic choke point for global oil supplies. Tehran has said it will keep the strait closed as long as what it calls a US naval blockade remains in place, a move that risks further intensifying an already fragile global energy situation.
Now let's turn to the recent high-level contacts between Azerbaijan and Latvia that reflect a steady deepening of bilateral relations. Azerbaijan's growing role in regional connectivity, particularly in linking Europe with Asia, has emerged as a key point of alignment, reinforcing the practical dimension of this partnership. Joining me now to discuss this in more detail is Sultan Zadov, leading advisor at the Air Center. Welcome to the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. My first question is, Azerbaijan and Latvia have described their particular relationship as a strategic partnership, but practically what does that mean and what will that involve?
Well, indeed, it was in 2017 when Azerbaijan and Latvia signed a declaration on strategic partnership. That was the time when President Ilham Aliyev visited Latvia and signed this declaration together with the then Latvian President Raimons Vajonis. And since that time, of course, the cooperation between Azerbaijan and Latvia has expanded in various areas, including the agriculture, digital transformations, and logistics and transportation, of course. It is an indication of the fact that, first of all, the bilateral relations between two countries are growing, and secondly, that both Latvia and European Union acknowledges the strategic importance of Azerbaijan as a spot which unites, let's say, Europe and Asia, which unites, let's say, various points across Eurasian continent. And especially now, when we face some geopolitical challenges, when there are global uncertainties, as it was mentioned by the Latvian president as well, both European Union and Latvia are exploring the ways of cooperating with reliable partners. And Azerbaijan is seen as a trustworthy and reliable partner by Latvia and by European countries. And that's the reason why Azerbaijan so far has signed strategic partnership declarations with many of the European countries. Azerbaijan is a key country, not just in terms of providing communication and connectivity between Europe and other parts of the Eurasia, but also in terms of playing a key role in the energy security of European Union. And as President Ilham Aliyev yesterday stressed, Azerbaijan as of today supplies gas to 10 EU countries, and that's a huge number.
It is, and obviously with more interest in, well, the stability of the region and with the Zangezur corridor route, developing further because of what the US interest is, which it's seeing a lot more investment and interest in the South Caucasus. But the bilateral trade turnover between Azerbaijan and Latvia is quite modest. It's not very high. However, why might this relationship matter more than the figures actually suggest? And what else is that partnership rooted in?
Yes, as you have rightly mentioned, the bilateral relations, they don't indicate the potential of cooperation between these two states. And as it was mentioned by both presidents yesterday, there are way more opportunities for both countries to explore in order to enhance this cooperation. And as an example for that, yesterday a number of important documents signed in various spheres, including in the sphere of border control, internal affairs, agriculture, by the way, and plant health as well, consular affairs. And this is yet another indication of the fact that both countries they are willing to expand the relationship, and other than that, they are discussing the political and economic dialogue within the format of intergovernmental commissions is ongoing, and both countries are now exploring the ways of further expanding this relationship. And as it was mentioned by Edgars Rinkēvičs yesterday, Latvia is also interested in development of cooperation in the spheres of in such spheres as defense industry, for example, pharmacy, connectivity, and so on. Hence, there are opportunities indeed. And it should be mentioned that already there are some Latvian companies investing in Azerbaijani economy, and I believe this visit, official visit of President, will further enhance this partnership in the area of investments and in other spheres of economy. And 1 week before this visit, we know that the meeting of the Intergovernmental Commission between Latvia and Azerbaijan took place in Shusha, and in that meeting, once again, the representatives of both countries discussed the ways of further expanding the relationship, what kind of investment projects can be implemented here, both in Azerbaijan and in Latvia, about the possible joint projects. And another important indicator of yesterday's visit was that after the bilateral meeting with President Ilham Aliyev, the business forum was held, and in that forum, vast number of representatives of both countries took part, where the business opportunities in both countries were discussed, which means that both Latvia and Azerbaijan are enthusiastic to participate in joint investment projects in the future.
Yeah, definitely. The ties is they're looking ahead, to make sure that this particular partnership grows and develops further. Now, Latvia President also supports the discussions regarding visa-free arrangements between Azerbaijan and the EU. How meaningful is this political signal in practical terms?
Well, I believe this is a matter of great importance, I believe, for both parties, because as it was mentioned by the Latvian president, Azerbaijan is a key strategic partner for not just for Latvia, but also for Europe in terms of energy security, in terms of connectivity opportunities it proposes. But nevertheless, taking into consideration all these, let's say, factors, Azerbaijan, I believe, and Latvia and Azerbaijan and the European Union in the broader sense must simplify the interaction. To simplify this interaction, you need to start working on the visa liberalization procedures. And in that sense, what was stated by the Latvian president is a matter of great importance, definitely. And if there is, for example, visa-free regime, or there are certain reforms in the sphere of visa liberalization, then the trade would boost between two parties. The interaction will increase, the trade will increase, which will further strengthen the cooperation. And for that matter, I believe what was stated by Latvian president should be, let's say, regarded seriously, not just but in broader Europe.
Yeah, and I guess in movement towards visa liberalisation were ever to materialise on this side of the fence, how transformative could that be in relation to the EU influence in Azerbaijan and the wider context of what that would mean for the people to move there and back and different opportunities that could bring?
Well, first of all, the visa liberalization might facilitate the increase in the people-to-people contacts, and which is key in terms of strengthening ties, not just in the sphere of economy and trade, but also in cultural sphere and in other spheres. And that's number one. And secondly, it is beneficial for European Union as well, because Europe now promotes such projects as Global Gateway. Europe now wants to reduce its energy dependence on other, let's say, powers, including Russia, and therefore they are exploring the ways of getting access to other channels, to other regions, getting more access to other, let's say, regions. And to do so, Europe needs to embark on the visa liberalization procedures with those countries, which European Union needs, by the way. And necessity for Azerbaijan can be visible in number of facts, such as the visit of President of European Union Commission Ursula von der Leyen to Azerbaijan, which happened in 2022, and Azerbaijan and EU signed a declaration on the strategic declaration on the energy partnership that time. And if there is this necessity, if Azerbaijan is indeed needed in that way, then the people-to-people contacts should be facilitated, and therefore visa liberalization procedures should be accelerated. And I believe, for that matter, the Latvian president stated it correctly, that from now on the measures should be taken in order to facilitate the easy interaction between two parties, to liberalize the visa procedures, and let's hope it will happen in the future.
Okay, well, definitely something to watch. And with that, with the two countries coming together, exchanging multiple agreements and elevating political dialogue, I'm just trying to make sure I get this. How should this momentum be interpreted? Obviously, we're seeing, quite a number of outcomes coming out of it. The two countries really want to grow that partnership. But how do we interpret that momentum? Is it going in the right direction? Is this something more that to come with other countries as well as Latvian and European countries? How do we interpret that?
Well, first of all, I would interpret in a way that this is yet another indication of the multi-vector policy pursued by Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan intends to broaden its scope of proactive diplomacy across various regions, and European Union is one of such regions. And by the way, European Union is #1 trading partner of Azerbaijan, and with that respect, the growing relationship between Azerbaijan and EU members, including Latvia, is not surprising, of course. And I believe this visit is a great opportunity, first of all, in terms of broadening the relationship on the bilateral level between Azerbaijan and Latvia. But secondly, on the level of Azerbaijan and EU relationship, their cooperation can further be strengthened, because European Union now sees the importance and strategic importance of Azerbaijan, and therefore I believe after Latvia some other representatives and members of the European Union can embark on decision to further elevate the cooperation with Azerbaijan. And I would like to mention that recently there was a meeting of the North 8 countries, the North 5 and the Baltic states. The representatives of those states visit Azerbaijan, and in that there were a number of meetings here in Azerbaijan, and in those meetings we discussed the possibilities for the future cooperation. And it is an indication that those EU members are indeed deeply interested in broadening relationship and cooperation.
Yes, and it seems to be the thing that will work out for all parties included in regards to that. And just finally, I just want to focus in on Azerbaijan, that continues to deepen ties with European partners, as you mentioned, and the role that it plays for the wider South Caucasus in relation to its, sovereignty, in relation to cooperation across its sectors, and how significant this political backing from Latvia is shaping the depth and direction of bilateral ties.
Well, as it was stressed by the Latvian president, Azerbaijan is the principal partner of Latvia in the South Caucasus region, was the principal partner and will be the principal partner. This is an indicator that Latvia indeed attaches a great importance in the cooperation with Azerbaijan. And this is not a coincidence, because Azerbaijan has been the leading actor in the region in shaping the security architecture of South Caucasus, in shaping the connectivity agenda of the South Caucasus region, and therefore this elevates Azerbaijan as a middle power, which is not following as a global powers, but just following its own track. And at the same time, it attracts the interest of other stakeholders, including European Union. And with that respect, I believe Azerbaijan and the visit of Latvian president to Azerbaijan says that once again, European Union, not just Latvia, but European Union will be more attached to South Caucasus in the future. European Union is interested in deepening cooperation, and hopefully it will happen soon.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Mr. Zadov, for your insights and for coming onto the program this morning.
It was a pleasure for me. Thank you.
Now let's turn to Turkey, and it has joined a growing number of European countries curbing its use of digital tech for young users after it passed a new law prohibiting social media for children under the age of 15. The ban also includes stricter controls on online gaming, including age ratings, and limits on access to unrated titles.
A bill banning social media for those under the age of 15 has been passed by the Turkish Grand National Assembly. The draft law on amendments to the law on social services and other laws covering provisions related to the use of social networks entered into force. The article "Deletion of Content and Blocking of Access to Posts" that was annulled by the Constitutional Court has been amended. Under the new rules, social media service providers will not be able to provide services to children under 15 years of age and will have to take necessary measures, including age verification, to prevent the provision of such services. Social media service providers will take the necessary measures to provide personalized services specifically for those over the age of 15. These measures will be published on the social media service provider's website. The regulations extend beyond social media to online gaming. Platforms will be prohibited from offering games without proper age ratings, and unrated titles may only be made available to adults under the highest age classification. The law will enter into force 6 months after being published in the official Gazette. Turkey joins Australia, France, Greece and Portugal in adopting similar child protection frameworks for the digital space. Turkey's new decision on social media follows a deadly school attacks in Kahramanmaraş and Şanlıurfa provinces.
It's now time for a break. When I return, I have an update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Stay with me. Hello, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm your host Nadia Jani, here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the key headlines. Iranian forces seized 2 ships on the Strait of Hormuz as Washington and Tehran maintain separate blockades. EU agrees to unlock €90 billion loan for Ukraine after the new Hungarian elected president lifts veto. And Lebanese Prime Minister accuses Israel of war crimes after strike kills journalist. Now let's take a look at the stories making the front pages, and we head first to the New York Times website in relation to Lufthansa, which is a German company, cuts 20,000 flights to save fuel as Iran war fallout spreads. Now the Lufthansa group, the German airline, said it is going to cut this amount of flights over the next 6 months in order to save jet fuel as the pressure builds on companies to address surging prices and declining supplies of energy caused by the war in Iran. Now, the overall, the cuts would actually save them 40,000 metric tons of jet fuel through to the end of October. The company added that it had already secured its fuel supply for the coming weeks, but also said that airlines across Europe have warned that the prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz would lead to fuel shortages and severe disruptions, which is what we're now beginning to see more and more. Europe is one of the largest consumers of jet fuel shipped through the Strait, and those shipments account for about 41% of the region's jet fuel imports, and that's according to a financial Macquarie Group, a financial services firm. And just last week, we know that the head of the International Energy Agency said that Europe had roughly 6 weeks of jet fuel supplies left before things really started to take a turn. So now that we're seeing this happening in Germany, it's maybe a matter of time where we might see more or other airlines also join in on that and cut down the number of flights that it is taking, and maybe even further increase certain flights or lower the number of destinations it's taking out throughout the week and months. Okay, now let's turn to our next story, and that is on the Reuters website. And it's actually, this story actually broke on the Financial Times, just to give you some context there. But Trump envoy seeks to replace Iran with Italy in upcoming World Cup, the Financial Times reported. Now, an envoy reportedly asked FIFA to replace Iran with Italy in the 2026 World Cup set for this summer, which was reported, as mentioned by the Financial Times. The plan is actually in an effort to repair the relationship between Donald Trump and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, which suffered because of Trump's comments against Pope Leo XIV regarding the war with Iran. Now, the US Special Envoy Paolo Zampoli was the one who suggested the idea to the FIFA president. The White House has not yet commented on this, and neither have FIFA, to find out whether or not that's something they are going to entertain or actually put in place. And just to add, Italy lost its chance to be in the World Cup this year after losing to Bosnia and Herzegovina in a qualifying playoff final. But we have more information on that later on in the program, so make sure you stay tuned. We'll now go to the next headline this morning, and that's still on the biggest story around the world, Iran and the US, and that's on the BBC website. And it says, Iran says Strait of Hormuz cannot be opened due to ceasefire breaches. Now, Iran's chief negotiator said it's impossible to reopen the Strait of Hormuz amid flagrant ceasefire breaches, adding that the blatant violations of the ceasefire by the US and Israel is what is causing that. He posted on X on Wednesday saying that the violations include the US naval blockade of Iranian ports, which he said amounted to taking the global economy hostage, and warmongering by Israel on all fronts. Now, on Wednesday, Iranian forces actually seized 2 ships in critical waterway. So we can see here, this is not necessarily the ship, but this is the critical waterway path, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Now, because of that, negotiations, Iran says they're still open to these negotiations, and that was according to its president Masoud Pezeshkian, saying that this was still on the table, but the breach of commitments, blockade and threats are the main obstacles to genuine negotiations. But on the Tuesday night, the US President Donald Trump did announce that he was extending the ceasefire, which was due to end yesterday evening on the Wednesday, but that has been extended until the 2 parties can come together and reach some form of agreement. But now let's go to our Washington correspondent that has more information on this top story.
The White House on Wednesday downplayed the capture of cargo ships in the Strait of Hormuz held by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard's Navy, with White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt telling reporters that since the ships were neither American nor Israeli, that the attacks were not considered a violation of the ceasefire agreement between the US and Iran. President Trump has extended the ceasefire, but it is not clear for what duration. White House officials believe that they can achieve a lasting deal with Iran But concerns are growing in Washington that factional infighting within Iran's government following a string of high-level assassinations has become a serious impediment to reaching an agreement. Sources in Washington say that President Trump is seeking to avoid the resumption of the conflict and that he believes that the U.S. has achieved all it can militarily for the time being. The big worry on the American side currently is whether they can find a counterpart in Tehran with the sufficient authority to agree to Trump's terms in ending future nuclear development activity and getting rid of existing stockpiles of highly enriched uranium in Iran, all critical components to a deal. President Trump on Wednesday also announced that Iranian authorities, upon his request, have reportedly spared the lives of 8 women protesters who were scheduled for execution. Human rights groups that monitor Iran said one of the women had been sentenced to death, but they had no confirmation of the death sentences for the others. Rights groups say that Iran's ongoing internet blackout severely complicates efforts to get up-to-date, verifiable information from within the country, where thousands of protesters are believed to be still detained. I'm Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
Now let's turn to Lebanon, and its prime minister has accused Israel of war crimes after an airstrike in the south of the country on Wednesday killed 5 people, including a journalist, and seriously wounded another. Israel's military said it struck 2 vehicles in southern Lebanon that departed from a military structure used by the Lebanese armed group Hezbollah, and added it does not target journalists. The strikes follow on from a US-mediated 10-day ceasefire, which began almost a week ago. Separately, French President Emmanuel Macron said a second French soldier had died after an attack on United Nations peacekeepers in Lebanon last week, which he has blamed on Hezbollah. Later today, representatives from Israel and Lebanon are set to hold a second round of talks. The United Kingdom and France have agreed on a new 3-year deal aimed at reducing irregular migrant crossings in the English Channel. Under the agreement, France will boost coastal enforcement by increasing personnel by more than 50%, while the UK will provide up to $897 million in funding, with part of the payment linked to results. The plan includes expanded patrols, intelligent work, drone surveillance, and additional maritime resources to intercept boats and disrupt smuggling networks. UK Home Secretary is expected to sign the deal in France, saying it's intended to stop dangerous crossings and target people smuggling gangs. To Europe, and the EU leaders are moving to unlock a €90 billion financial lifeline for Ukraine after months of deadlock after Hungary lifted its veto. Here's our Europe correspondent.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the EU is set to unlock a major financial lifeline for Ukraine, along with a fresh wave of sanctions against Russia. EU member states are expected to formally approve a €90 billion loan package for Kyiv today after months of political deadlock inside the bloc. The delay centered on Hungary, which blocked the deal in February amid a dispute over Russian oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline. However, after EU ambassadors started discussions on the loan Wednesday, Ukrainian officials informed their Hungarian counterparts that oil pumping resumed through that pipeline to Central Europe, prompting Budapest to lift the veto imposed by the Orbán government and clearing the way for agreement among all 27 member states. Now, the funding is critical. Ukraine is facing a growing wartime budget gap, with officials warning that without sustained external support, the government could struggle to maintain essential services and economic stability in the months ahead. If approved in the coming days, the package would mark one of the EU's most significant coordinated moves this year, and a renewed show of unity after months of internal divisions, this all following the electoral defeat of Viktor Orbán and a shift in tone from the future Prime Minister Peter Magyar, who has signaled a push to rebuild Hungary's relationship with the bloc at a critical moment in the war. At the same time, Brussels is preparing what would be its 20th sanctions package against Russia, targeting energy revenues, financial networks, and the so-called shadow fleet used to bypass existing restrictions. Together, the measures point to a clear European strategy: keep Ukraine financially supported while maintaining pressure on Moscow. For EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, the loan sends a message that Russia cannot simply wait Ukraine out. More broadly, the twin moves reflect a more coordinated response at a critical point in the war, combining financial backing for Kyiv with sustained economic strain on Russia. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Turning to Russia, and a Russian airstrike has hit the southeastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro, injuring 7 people, including 2 children. Officials say 5 of the injured remain in hospital as emergency crews continue rescue efforts. In Russia's to appease, firefighters are still battling a refinery fire on its 3rd day after a reported Ukrainian drone strike, with air quality worsening. Meanwhile, Russia says talks with the US and Ukraine remain at a standstill, while President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is open to a ceasefire but sees little progress for now. Over in North Korea, North Korean state media says an opening ceremony for a bridge linking North Korea and Russia across the Tumen River will be held soon. The 2 countries held a ceremony on Tuesday to mark the connection of the structure. The 850-meter bridge will link to Russia's highway system, reducing the distance between Vladivostok and the border city of Rasan to 320 kilometers. The crossing, expected to open in June, will have the capacity to accommodate up to 300 cars per day. Now to the US, and a chemical leak at a plant in West Virginia has killed at least 2 people and many others injured. Officials say the situation is being addressed and have assured the public that there has been no further contamination to water supplies.
At least 2 people have died and several others required medical attention following a chemical leak at a silver catalyst plant in West Virginia on Wednesday. The incident occurred at Catalyst Refiners in the unincorporated community of Institute. Authorities have since lifted an earlier shelter-in-place order and say they are working to manage the situation.
And once again, that's why the shelter-in-place was lifted, the roads were open. So I want to assure people that people have been on top of this. They're trying to address this situation. To the families we lost today, the families of those we lost today, our hearts are with you, and our state grieves for you. We stand ready to support you in every way possible.
Officials believe a chemical reaction occurred during a cleaning and decontamination process ahead of the plant's closure, releasing deadly hydrogen sulfide gas. The state's Department of Environmental Protection has been called in to assist with the safe disposal of waste materials generated during the process. Authorities say at least 1 person remains in critical condition, while more than 30 people, including 7 emergency responders, have been checked into medical facilities. Concerns about possible contamination of water supplies have been dismissed, with officials assuring the public that drinking water has not been affected.
No, the water plants that we get water around here and in the St. Albans will not be affected. This stuff is a gas. It did not get into the water. There's no water, even if it did get into water, there's no water treatment plants till you get to Huntington from that location. So it will not affect drinking water or anything like that.
Federal agencies, including the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, are expected to investigate the incident.
Military exercises were held in the Kars province of Turkey with the participation of the Turkish and Azerbaijani armed forces on Wednesday. The Hayder Aliyev 2026 Joint Battalion Task Group drills were accompanied by live fire exercises. Participants were first briefed on modern weapons and combat equipment, as well as unit deployment and the planned stages of the exercise. You're watching Daybreak, and we're going to take a quick break and I'll be joined by a guest just after. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now let's turn back to our top story. And Iranian forces have seized 2 ships in the Strait of Hormuz as the US and Iran double down on imposing separate blockades on the key shipping waterway route. Joining me now to discuss this further and in detail is political analyst Orkan Nabiev. Welcome to the program. Hello.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Now, things seem to have come to a stall just because both sides are saying that they've got the blockade. The US has the blockade against Iran ports. Iran says that's not something that they want, and they're now shutting and closing the key waterway path. What happens now? Both are supposed to come together in Islamabad to have negotiations and discussions about what to do to end this particular war. What will happen in regards to this? Where can these talks actually go, and can they take place?
The both sides try to prolong the situation till the one side will lose the temper. There will be elections in the United States, and Iran tries to prolong the situation till the elections. And they're playing with the United States, and we know that the authoritarian regimes, they are more resistant to the economic crises and the social humanitarian crises. But there will be another crisis in the United States that will lead the high prices for the oil, will lead to high prices for the gasoline. It will lead to high prices for the products. And when will be elections in the United States, the citizens of the United States will vote against Trump. So Iran tries in one side to prolong the situation till the elections, and the United States tries to prolong the situation till the economic and the humanitarian crisis inside Iran. So both sides don't want to start a big war again, especially President Trump. He doesn't want to start the military operations again. However, this situation will lead till the one side will lose her.
So who has the upper hand in all of this? They seem to be right now at a complete standstill, one controlling one part of the Strait of Hormuz, one blocking Iranian ports. Who has the upper hand, and who do you think will cave into the pressures?
Usually the Iranian side seems more resistant, despite they being bombed totally. The many infrastructure in Iran totally demolished after the bombing and shelling. However, this kind of the regimes are more resistant, despite the democratic regimes. The democratic regimes are more weak in the sense of because they have the big pressure from the society, they have big pressure from electoral groups, they have the big pressure from elite, and that's why in this case the Iranian seems more resistant, despite that military they are weak, economically they are weak, but in the sense of the governments they can hold. And there's no one government in Iran right now. That's also the one main case.
And with all of this, global markets have been soaring, especially when it comes to the price of oil, which has been going up, going down, just because of the talks, if the talks are happening or if they're not happening. We're seeing that Europe as well, they're saying that it has 6 weeks until its oil runs very low. We're seeing companies now changing number of flights that normally would head out, but now it's reduced all of that. Where does it leave other countries in relation to this, and what pressures can these countries add to open the Strait of Hormuz?
In one hand, these countries can press the United States to bring back the situation before the war, and to stop, to have some deal with Iran. And in this case, Iran insists that they are the winner side, and for the European Union, it will create some kind of the involuntary situation that they will press the United States to agree with the conditions of Iran. But the United States, especially Trump, will not agree with that. In another hand, there's another war in the European continent, and the support of Ukraine, military support of Ukraine will decrease, and it will open the new possibilities for Russian oil and Russian gas and the Russian exports that Europe will try to lift the sanctions. Now we see that Europe started lifting the Russian oil transportation, not for the Russian oil, but for the Russian oil transportation. This will create the new opportunities for Russia.
Yes, the Druzhba pipeline, which was destroyed and now has been put back together by Ukraine. Now, let's just focus in on what's going on with Pakistan, who has stepped in as a key mediator in relation to this. Now, their influence might be waning, but what could they do to bring both parties together and really kind of broker a peace deal between the US and Iran?
Pakistan mostly, and at the same time we will not forget Turkey. Turkey also tries. So, but many credits to Pakistan. They try to bring together the both sides. They play the shuttle diplomacy role. They understand position of the United States. They also understand position of Iran, and they try to play the mediator role. But at the same time, Pakistan also the main ally of China. China also has its own interest in this conflict. In one hand, China wants to make United States weaker with this war, but in another hand, this big influence, big impact to China, because the oil prices is going up. At the same time, the main export point of the Chinese goods is a Hormuz Bay. It's Dubai, it's Qatar, it's rich Arab countries, Gulf countries. That's why China is also interested in the resolution of this process. So Pakistan plays the central role between Iran, United States, and China.
I see. And just turning slightly to Lebanon, we know that there's discussions with Israel and Lebanon's leader today in the White House. If there was an agreement of some form of peace agreement between Lebanon, Hezbollah, Israel, would that influence Iran and the US to also come to the table and get a deal?
The thing that Lebanese government, they don't control total Lebanon. Lebanon mostly controlled by and the Hezbollah, they listen Sepah, the Islamic Revolutionary Corps. So they are under the Iranian influence than the Lebanese influence. So Lebanon used to be one of the peaceful and developing countries in the 70s, but the civil war and the Iranian influence and the Hezbollah made this country a failed state. And Lebanon is interesting to have the peace with Israel, and the Christians of the Lebanon, they have will to have this kind of the peace negotiations. But Hezbollah decides not by the Lebanon. Hezbollah decides by the Iran. So what Iran will decide, Hezbollah will go for that.
I see. So that's the person, that's who's pulling the strings behind the scenes. It's more to do with Iran and Hezbollah coming together. And just very finally, we're now at this crossroads. What do you think will happen? We've had an extension of a ceasefire with President Donald Trump. What will be the next move?
The next move will be to wait, and when the one side will lose temper, and it seems that United States will go to the compromise with the Iranian some demands. At the same time, Iran, but the main problem of the nukes of Iran will not be resolved. Maybe partially, but Iran will not leave this uranium to the United States or to the third country.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Nabia, for your insights there. We are watching very closely as to how things progress between Iran and the US. Thank you again. Now, We turn to our next story, and that's in regards to what's taken place in an American zoo in Washington that has welcomed a baby elephant that is capturing the hearts of its visitors. But her survival is an even stronger and more emotional story. Let's take a look at that.
So cute.
Lin Mai, the first Asian elephant calf born at the Smithsonian's National Zoo in nearly 25 years, is quickly becoming a star attraction after making her public debut on Earth Day. Born on February 2nd, the playful calf now weighs nearly 500 pounds and stands about 1 metre tall. Zoo staff describe her as energetic, curious and full of personality, already winning over visitors as she runs, splashes and explores her enclosure. But behind the scenes, her start in life has required careful, round-the-clock support.
Lin Mai is currently doing very well. During the pregnancy, we were planning for several different outcomes, from mom raising the calf to us needing to be more intimately involved in her life. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. So our team is part of her unlikely family. We are providing her with her bottle feedings every 2 hours. And then we introduced her to an unrelated female, Swarna, who's kind of stepped in as an aunt and a guardian. And she's giving Lin Mai everything she needs from a social and companionship.
Shortly after birth, keepers noticed that Lin Mai's mother, Nhi Lin, was not forming a strong bond with the calf, prompting the team to adjust their approach.
We were reading behavior and observing that Nhi Lin just wasn't necessarily comfortable with her. And while we spent a few weeks trying to put them together, we really didn't see that bond happen. So rather than continuing to stress out both mom and the calf, we decided to give it a little break. We knew that Swarna was going to be a fantastic companion for her.
Oh my God.
Lin Mai's days are busy and full of discovery. And for visitors, seeing her in person has quickly become a highlight.
I think it's just a really cool experience, especially for the kids. Our first trip to DC, and to see something like so unique like this, just coincidentally, is really, really cool.
I mean, just feeling like this is part of something, like, I don't know, like just so cool. This is the first baby elephant that's been born here in 25 years. And so getting to see her debut is just really special.
Lin Mai continues to charm crowds, growing, learning and finding her place within her unusual but devoted family.
She's really cute. She's so cute.
She's definitely winning hearts over here as well. That's lovely. Well, that's all of the stories for this morning. Thank you very much for watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. I'll be back tomorrow to take you through the latest updates, but make sure you stay tuned to A News for further information throughout the course of the day. Take care.